Welcome back to Julie's Village. I'm glad you're here. If you haven't heard yet, in addition to providing these general videos, I also provide coaching support to families to help them apply the strategies to your specific family. If you would like more information or you'd like to be added to my waiting list, you can email me at juliesvillage@gmail.com. Julie's does not have an apostrophe. In previous episodes, I talked about motivators and reinforcement. Closely related to that is the topic of consequences and decisions. Oftentimes, when we hear the word consequences, it's used to refer to something negative. For instance, you may have heard somebody say something like, if you don't have your room clean by the time I get back upstairs, there will be consequences. In this case, consequences is referring more to like a punishment. Using the more academic or clinical definition of consequences can help to help you to better understand what they are so that you can use them as a powerful teaching tool. Consequences in this, again, more academic or clinical sense, really is just meaning something that follows a behavior. It can be a reaction or a response or a situation that follows a specific behavior. They can be negative or they can be positive. Anytime that we're referring to a consequence that is more likely to increase a behavior, we're talking about reinforcement. Anytime that we're talking about a consequence that is more likely to decrease a behavior, that is referring to punishment. Consequences can also be natural or they can be contrived. For instance, if a child touches a hot stove, there is a natural consequence of pain. But we as adults can contrive a consequence when we see an attempt to touch the stove. That could just be simply to pull them away, or maybe have them have a timeout so that they associate a negative feeling with touching the stove to help protect them from experiencing that consequence of the pain that comes from touching the stove. Consequences can also be internal or external. Those internal consequences are the feelings that we have after doing something. For instance, if a child really likes ice cream, they might have that internal consequence of feeling really good or that pleasure after eating ice cream. They might also feel guilty after saying something unkind. The external might be if they said something unkind and their friend decided to walk away. Understanding these aspects of consequences can help you to frame consequences in a way that they can be powerful teaching tools. For example, understanding reinforcement and punishment can help you to assess what is happening after a behavior and determine if it is reinforcing or if it is punishing. For instance, in a school example, if a child is drawing on their desk and you are having them stay in at recess to clean off their desk, and they seem like they're really happy to be doing that and excited, what is happening is you might be reinforcing the behavior of drawing on the desk because they actually like cleaning up. They enjoy cleaning off the drawing. Maybe they like using the wipes. Knowing that can help you to frame more of a opportunity for them to use the wipes or to help clean up in a way that is more appropriate. For instance, you might say to them, hey, I would really like your help using these wipes to clean off my teacher table. But in order to do that, I need to trust that you can take care of things. So I'm going to be watching to see if you're taking care of your desk to know if you can come help me with this table. That can help them to still get that desired outcome, but still be able to understand that they need to treat their things better and treat other things better. You can also pay attention to what they're telling you about some of those internal things that are happening, and help point out that those are potentially natural consequences of what's going on. For instance, if they are so excited to take the spelling test that day because they studied their words, you can tell them, "Oh, it feels so good when you've done your best and you're prepared. I am so excited to see how you do on the spelling test." Before I discuss this natural versus contrived decision making as a way to be a powerful teaching tool, we first need to talk about decision making. There's an important element to consider in decision making, and that is where your child's abilities are for making decisions. This can depend on their age and also just their cognitive ability. For example, a child can make a decision about eating vegetables in the moment. They can know if they are willing or not willing to try something new. Maybe they've already tried a vegetable and they've decided if they like it or don't like it. But as an adult, we have a further reaching ability to make decisions in that we can see long-term consequences. There are not too there isn't too big of an impact on a child's physical health if they eat or don't eat vegetables that day. But there are long-term consequences in habits of eating. You can frame consequences to help children with this decision-making process, with this idea of those longer-term consequences in mind. So as adults, we're able to see those short-term consequences, but we're also able to see those long-term consequences. Children don't have the experience yet to be able to see that far ahead. So when you're thinking about decisions to offer your child and then thinking about the consequences, that is something to keep in mind. Is again your ability to see both the immediate and the long term versus a child's ability to see the immediate, but their long term ability to see is more limited. When you're thinking about that, you might think about what kind of decisions either you're making or your child is making, and you might need to be intentional about thinking through that. What decisions are you okay with your child making, and what decisions do you need to have the majority of the decision making power in? For example, I don't know this family personally, but this was a story that was told to me about a family who was trying to consider if they should do half day kindergarten or all day tuition kindergarten. At the time in our state, um, tuition kindergarten was the only option for all day kindergarten, but half day kindergarten was free. This family was discussing what they should do and trying to decide. They expressed the fact that it would be better for the family if the child was in all-day kindergarten, because it would be lower childcare fees and it would allow the parents to work more. But they decided that they were going to leave the decision in the hands of the child. That is a lot of responsibility to put on a 5 or 6 year old. They might not recognize that that responsibility is there, but that's a pretty big decision when they are not able to see the impact on the family or the long-term impact on their education. That is a decision that I would recommend be made by an adult, because an adult can see those long term consequences and they can see the immediate big picture impact on more than just the child and on the child themselves as well. When you're thinking about these natural versus contrived consequences, again, you want to apply this idea of the decisions and their ability to make the decisions and what the long term consequences might be. not just the short-term consequences. An example of this might be if your child forgets to take their homework to school. So again, you might consider their age here. Are they pretty young, and is it okay if they don't have their homework at school that day? You might also consider, well, are they pretty young and they're not at the point yet where they're independently able to get their homework to school? Then you might consider helping bring it in that day. You might also consider, again, at that age, if they are older, what are the long-term consequences of bringing their homework in? Have you already seen habits that they've established of doing their homework and getting their homework to school independently? And this was one of a few circumstances where they didn't. So then you might decide, I am going to bring their homework to them at school because I want them to see that they're not in this alone, that we're a team and I'm there to help. Or you might say that, or might recognize that this is a habit that they're forming of not being responsible for their things. They are capable of bringing their homework to school and they didn't that day. And you might want them to just experience that. Like, it's uncomfortable. I have to tell my teacher I don't have my homework. I might have to take a drop in points for this homework assignment. And you might just let them live with those natural consequences. You might also contrive some consequences in that situation of that, you know what, they have the age ability, but there's some other things that they are struggling with that I can help them with. So you might have a consequence then of helping them to set up a system to be more effective at bringing their homework themselves. Maybe it's a check-in that you do together every night, and now they're responsible, or they will need to have this check-in with you every night. Or maybe you help them to set up some kind of visual reminder that they will use independently to help make sure that they get their homework in their backpack. And then you can decide from there, am I going to help them out this time? Or am I going to allow them to experience the natural consequences of I forgot and now I just don't have it and I won't be able to have it until I get back home and I can get it myself? Another important factor for both decision making and consequences with children is just safety, their emotional and their physical safety. That is something to always consider. Right along with that, something that is also important to consider when you are trying to determine if you are going to allow a natural consequence to happen, if you're going to contrive a consequence either to help reinforce a behavior or to reduce or to eliminate a behavior, is your why behind it. What is motivating you to present that consequence or to enforce a consequence? Oftentimes, I find that when I have responded to a behavior of a child in anger or in frustration, those are the times that I most often feel guilty or frustrated with myself about how I responded to a situation. But if I'm able to just slow down for a second and pause and think about the why behind a consequence before I give it, either if I am considering like what was the safety risk here, or what am I hoping that the child will learn, and then designing the consequence to align with what I'm hoping that they will learn, or allowing the consequence to happen because of what I am hoping that the child will learn. Those are the times that I feel confident in the decision that I've made. It's okay to course correct as well. If you begin by responding out of anger or out of frustration or out of fear, and you can see that that isn't in the best interest of the child or the student or whoever you're working with, you can talk with them and let them know why the consequence is going to change, especially if it's a contrived consequence or you've decided to um, provide some help to help with the results of a natural consequence. It's okay to say something like, you know what, I need to apologize to you. I was really angry and I didn't handle that situation the way that I want to. So I've given it some thought. And instead of you not being able to play your video games for a week, I'm just going to say the rest of today. And I'll reassess tomorrow, and we'll talk again and see how things are going. That could be an example of a way that you might shift gears. Or maybe you'll say, you know what, I said that we could have ice cream, but I've given it some thought and we have had a lot of ice cream this week. So you can either choose a different snack or we can have ice cream tomorrow night instead. Something something along those lines can be, again, really powerful teaching tools because it helps you to feel confident again in the way that the consequence is being delivered. But it can also help the child to recognize what to do and to see by your response how to handle it when um, you feel like you haven't reacted well, which teaches them how they might respond if they feel like they haven't reacted well to a situation. As is the case with most strategies, this is one that might take quite a bit of practice and might also require quite a bit of patience for yourself and for your child as you work to become more intentional with recognizing decisions that your child can and should be making and consequences that um, could fit with those decisions. I invite you to take some time to think through some of the more common behaviors of your child, both those that you want to reinforce and those that you might want to reduce or eliminate. And then think about some of the natural or contrived consequences that might help to either reinforce or reduce and eliminate. Think about your why behind why you might want to reinforce them or you might want to reduce or eliminate. And it is okay if your answer is just, I just don't like that. I don't like when they do that. It's not necessarily harmful, but I don't like when they do it. Because your feelings matter too, but also if it's something that bothers you, there are probably people that they will encounter in their future that it might bother as well. Roommates or future spouse or friends or family members. You might also want to take some time to think about what are the short term and the long term consequences and impact of those behaviors for your child and for those around them. Again, keeping in mind that their age, their cognitive ability, and any safety factors. If any of this was helpful to you today, I invite you to like, share, subscribe, and help get the word out to others who might also benefit from this resource. If you have any experiences with consequences or thoughts or ideas that you would like to share, I invite you to leave that in the comments. Thank you for being here with us, and we'll see you next time.